Herman Prime is the newest Archer Commander released to Rise of Kingdoms, and he came out literally yesterday. And in today's video, I'm going to be answering a question a lot of people have asked me. Should you invest in Herman Prime, or should you invest in Boudica Prime, the old, newest, primary Archer Commander? So, if you're interested in who to invest in, maybe you have other Archer Commanders like YSG, or even Artemisia or Nebu, or maybe you just want to know more about Herman and more about Boudica, then you definitely want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off today's video by going over something a little bit different to Boudica and Herman, and it's just a real quick, why am I not really discussing Zhuge too much in today's video? Well, I think that Zhuge, instead of Boudica and Herman, is a bit of a different commander. He's almost a must-invest for archers. If you don't have him, pretty much any player is going to go and get him first. So I think Zhuge is a separate topic of discussion. He's not really the same as Herman and Boudica. Since most players either have Zhuge or are working on him at the moment, he is not the same as Herman and Boudica in terms of open field usage and open field pairing. So I think he's a little bit different, and that's why he's not the main focus point of today's video. With that out of the way, let's just start off by talking about the strengths and weaknesses of both commanders in comparison to each other, rather than just their strengths and weaknesses in general. What does each commander do really well, and what does each commander do really bad compared to the other one? And we'll start off with Boudica Prime. The first thing I like about Boudica Prime's kit is the fact she's got a ton of skill damage reductions and a lot of normal damage bonus. That is just two things Herman Prime does not have in his kit, and it's obviously going to be very powerful in the open field. Taking less skill damage means at all times, any AoE you take besides Lao Che is going to be much weaker. And obviously that's just a good thing, because less AoE taken means obviously less sevs in the hospital. The next thing I like about Boudica's kit is the march speed reduction here on her active skill. Of course, she's got the skill damage as well, but Herman Prime does do this a little bit better. But this march speed reduction, in my, knowledge, is the only one for Archer commanders. I don't think there's another one if I'm not mistaken. And obviously, we all know archers are a slow, just troop type in general. All the commanders for archers are obviously just slow. The archer troops themselves are not particularly fast, so they don't ever really have too much march speed. So Boudica Prime is able to reduce the march speed on an opponent, which means sometimes you are able to get an extra active skill or two active skills into that opponent before they can escape, and sometimes that is just enough to kill them in general. So Boudica Prime's active skill debuff, obviously she's got an amazing skill damage increase, but she's also got this march speed reduction, which honestly, compared to Herman Prime, is really good, because yes, Herman has a lot more skill damage bonuses, which I'll get into in a minute. Boudica Prime, though, has a march speed reduction, which in my opinion is probably one of the most valuable things in her kit if you're running a lot of archer marches or a lot of slower marches, maybe even compared to whales in the KVK, who have access to tons of crystal tech. Another thing I do like about Boudica's kit is the fact that she has a fair amount of defense here, but do keep in mind she has to lose 80% of units to actually access that. She also does just have more attack than Herman Prime, which is obviously a good thing. The final thing that Boudica Prime does over Herman Prime, which I really like, is the thing that she has control effects. She is able to shrug off all control effects, pretty much 80% chance to get rid of them. So silence, disarm, and heal immune. We don't really see disarm, so it's more silence and heal immune. And really, we don't care about heal immune. So it's basically, she can shrug off silence, which means Guans are very weak against Boudica. So Guan Yu against Boudica Prime is almost a perfect matchup for Boudica, especially if she is expertise. Not to mention, she doesn't need her expertise. That's obviously an advantage, since Herman Prime's expertise is quite essential to his kit. So Boudica, 5551, really cheap investment. It's going to work on the open field. Herman, you eventually do want to get his expertise to get his full value. So that's something we should keep in mind. So do keep that in mind with Boudica. She's a cheap investment. But if you want to get those control effect shrug-offs, she does need to be expertise to fully be able to access that. Other than that, though, she's a strong primary commander, and she does have the skill tree, which in my opinion is better than Herman Prime's support tree. So now that we've finished discussing the strengths of Boudica Prime compared to Herman, what does Herman do better than Boudica Prime? And the first thing he just does better is the fact that he is giving poison stacks. And why do I say this is just better than Boudica in every way? Well, it's really simple. Boudica Prime's debuff, where she increases the skill damage the target takes, is only on a single target, whereas Herman Prime is inflicting poison stacks at all times to 3 targets. He never ever does single target poison stacks. It's always going to be a 3 target AoE. And why is this really good? Well, it's pretty simple. It means that Herman Prime can not only get a higher amount of skill damage increase, but it's able to be inflicted on 3 enemy troops, which means any AoE commanders you're running and anyone that's run with Herman Prime. So for example, if you're running a YSG with Herman Prime, his AoE is going to hit a target that has been poisoned if they stay within the same range, because Herman Prime is also an AoE commander. So in those situations, Herman is able to inflict tons of poison to multiple targets and pretty much take Boudica Prime's skill damage increase, which she does on her active skill, put it on 3 targets and allow AoE commanders to hit them. So it's really, really powerful, not to mention the fact he has AoE of his own, which is obviously just going to be stronger than Boudica Prime's single target damage. That's just something we all know. AoE, super overpowered, and it's obviously going to be really good in Herman Prime's kit, and that has not changed. So Herman Prime, his actual skill damage increase, if we look at his poison stacks like it's a skill damage increase, are technically stronger than Boudica Prime's by a mile, especially when put with an AoE commander. The next advantage Herman Prime has over Boudica, he has 5% more march speed. That may not sound like a lot, but when we think of it like this, it's a 50% increase compared to Boudica. So that's a really, really large amount of march speed. And for archers, that's crazy, crazy high. But do keep in mind, he is missing the Boudica Prime active skill march speed reduction, when if you're on the attack, that's going to be really good. So Herman is missing that, but he does almost somewhat make up with it for the march speed bonus there. Obviously, 30% is way more than 5%, but still this can be good in both the attack and the retreat. So I do like that march speed in Herman's kit, and also he has access to the defense 24/7, whereas Boudica Prime on her second skill needs to be below 80% units. So Herman Prime is easily able to access his defense 24/7, Boudica needs to lose some amount of units, which means she may not be able to fully benefit from it. The next thing I like about Herman Prime's kit is he's got an AoE skill damage bonus. That's just really good. It's almost like Boudica Prime's active skill once again, because we can look at Boudica Prime's active skill as almost skill damage bonus to your troops, but only to one target. Whereas Herman Prime, 20% skill damage bonus in an AoE means any AoE commanders with him are going to deal a lot more skill damage than they would with Boudica Prime, because 20% skill damage is actually a fairly large amount. The other thing to keep in mind is Herman has a passive debuff, which is just going to be really good since it's never ever going to lose value, no matter what. Also, his poison stacks won't lose value, whereas Boudica Prime's skill damage increase can be overtaken by another new commander by Lilith. And that's not crazy to say. We've seen commanders like Gilgamesh have an amazing debuff and get that stolen by someone like CPO Prime. So Herman can never ever lose his value from the poison stacks, because no matter what, they're always going to stack. Even if they add another poison commander, Herman will stack with that commander as well. So do keep that in mind. Poison stacks are always going to be a very powerful thing no matter what, whereas Boudica Prime can technically lose her value. So it's almost like Herman has a passive debuff on his active skill. That's how good it is. The last thing I like about Herman Prime is the fact that he can become one of the most tanky commanders in the game, because he can gain 15% all damage reduction, which is literally, I think, the highest in the game, unless maybe there's some rally commanders which can do that when they're rallying. So Herman Prime's 15% all damage reduction is up there with the best in the game, and if you get him ramped up, it's going to be really good. So now that we've discussed the advantages to Herman, I would also like to talk about one quick thing that is his biggest downside. Herman needs to be in combat for a while to fully access his value, because obviously, if I just told you everything I just said, you'd be like, Herman is the most overpowered commander in the game. There's no way I'd ever invest in Boudica, he does so much better than her. But it's only when he gets fully ramped up. His extreme amounts of skill damage bonuses up to, I think, 135%, only apply when he's been in combat for quite a while. He has to be in there for like a full skill cycle, maybe even 2 to 3 full skill cycles. You could even get 4 if you're very unlucky, because you need to be lucky with that Mandrake route. So with Herman Prime, you either need to be very lucky, or you need to be in combat for a while, and both of those things are not the best for the open field. Whereas with Boudica Prime, yes, you're technically getting a lower amount of skill damage bonuses, and she's not working as well with AoE commanders, but she has got more consistency. It's just throw active skill, deal a guaranteed amount of damage, throw active skill again. Whereas Herman Prime, it's throw active skill, hope you can get Mandrake route kind of ramped up, hope you get it to trigger more poison effects, and then you'll be in a better position. So you need to be lucky with Herman, or you need to be in combat for a while with Herman to fully gain the potential of his kit, whereas Boudica is just one skill cycle, fully ramped up, you're good to go. So Herman, not the most overpowered commander for the open field if you can't stay around in combat for longer, which is why I'm definitely a bit more hesitant to do dual testing with him rather than look at proper open field situations, which is where most players are going to use him. So Herman can be tough to use on the open field, not to mention His fourth skill is really, really good to have, and his expertise is also very, very good. So you kind of want to get that expertise, whereas with Boudica, it's not 100% needed. It's more just a Guan counter with some extra ore damage on the side. But Herman Prime, expertise is almost necessary, so keep that in mind. It's a higher investment, but he also does need a little bit of RNG or a little bit of open field ramp up to fully become as powerful as he can be. So now that we've discussed the strengths and weaknesses of Boudica Prime and also Herman Prime, let's just go into the commanders that work really well with Boudica to begin with. So well, in fact, that if you have any of the commanders I'm about to mention expertise and you don't have Boudica and you don't have Herman, you get Boudica first because they just work so well with her. First of all, I would say Cyrus is a really good commander with Boudica. His single target damage, he has a ton of debuffs which are just going to be powerful, and he's going to give her extra march speed as a sustained mechanism. He is also lacking a skill damage reduction besides on his third skill right here, which is almost a bit RNG based, but he is also actually in a way missing a lot of defense if you don't have him expertised, and even when he's expertised, he doesn't have access to this at all times. So Cyrus needs defense, he needs skill damage reductions. Boudica brings both of those. She's increasing single target skill to the next level, and also she's dealing more ore damage. So I think Boudica probably works better with Cyrus than Herman does, so do keep that in mind. I think as well, Gilgamesh works better with Boudica purely because single target damage is better with Boudica than it is with Herman. Ramses works better with Boudica. Edward of Woodstock, El Cid, all these commanders work better with Boudica than they would with Herman. Artemisia, obviously the best pair for Boudica, I think, in the game besides Zhuge, and she is going to be just, if you have her, instantly max Boudica, don't even bat an eye, and she's going to work better than she would with Herman Prime. I'm going to leave Zhuge out of this count right now because he's going to earn his own separate discussion, which is something we should keep in mind, and also Henry, I think, earns his own separate discussion as well, but keep in mind he is a very good pair with Boudica if you want a single target damage only march. So now that we've gone over the commanders that work really well with Boudica, the commanders that work really well with Herman are fairly simple. YSG, Nebuchadnezzar, Tamiris as a standout commander, and Ashurbanipal as a standout commander. All four of those commanders, absolute meta pairings with Herman Prime, no doubt about it. YSG has got a rage engine, which Herman definitely needs if you want to use him as a primary, since the support tree is very slow to gain its initial rage, and YSG can help boost that. Not to mention YSG has AoE, Herman is boosting AoE a lot between his AoE skill damage bonuses pretty much, and also his AoE skill damage bonus here. So he's got it on his active skill with the poison, and also on the third skill. Also, YSG is boosting skill damage, which is going to be better with an AoE commander than with a single target commander like Boudica Prime, and Herman has more march speed, which means YSG is obviously going to benefit from that as well. Nebu has AoE, nothing more needs to be said there. Tamiris is the second poison commander in the game. Obviously, Herman benefits from the target having more poison effects, so Tamiris is going to be a meta pair with Herman Prime. And finally, Ashurbanipal's expertise synergizes crazily well with Herman, not to mention he has AoE as well. So Ashurbanipal with Herman, probably going to be one of the best marchers in the game as well, so you're just going to get Herman if you got Ashurbanipal for rallying. Obviously, you wouldn't rally with Herman, but if you get Ashurbanipal for rallying, you get Herman Prime, and you've got a very, very solid march right there that I can say confidently from now is going to synergize really well even on the open field. So now that we've discussed all the commanders which work really well with Herman, why did I not mention Zhuge and why did I not mention Henry? Two of the most popular archer commanders, Henry, one of the most utilized primaries in the game currently for archers, and Zhuge, probably one of the most owned commanders in the game in general, and there's two reasons for that. With Henry, I think he works equally well with both commanders. With Boudica as a single target march, it's really good, it's going to be really simple, you just throw an active skill and you leave combat, super easy. With Herman, he's going to make Herman much more tanky, which I think in shorter battles, Herman is going to need. Obviously, in longer fights, Herman doesn't really need it as much, but if it's a short fight, Herman definitely needs it, and Henry is going to be a good way to boost him in those fights, but Henry doesn't benefit from all the AoE bonuses that Herman is putting out there, so it's almost an equal in that regard, where Henry really, really good with Herman, really good with Boudica. I couldn't say that there's one commander he's necessarily the best with. Zhuge, though, I left him as a separate standalone commander, because I think he deserves his own discussion. He's a commander that is very, very popular. Most players are riding on Zhuge with Herman or Boudica to decide their basically investment. And the real simple answer is, out of both Boudica and Herman, if you've only got Zhuge, you probably want to get Herman. Really simply because Zhuge is an AoE commander. And like I said, Herman is just the AoE boosting commander. Everything in his kit is made to boost AoE damage. His poison effects boosted, his AoE skill damage boosted, his own skill damage is boosted by most AoE commanders. So he's just the pick if you want to run Zhuge, and I think that's just the truth behind that. So if you're looking to run Zhuge on the open field, Herman is the best choice. But there is something we should keep in mind. Just because Herman is currently the best with Zhuge and Boudica is not the best with Zhuge, doesn't mean that if you're running Boudica Zhuge right now and you don't plan to get 2 Archer Marches, you should get rid of Boudica. If you've currently got Boudica with Zhuge, just stick with that March. Don't drop it. Keep using it. Herman is not that much more overpowered. Yes, he's got more benefits over Boudica with Zhuge specifically, but he doesn't necessarily need to be paired with him. Herman's got other options if you want to invest in him. Also, Boudica with Zhuge still works perfectly fine nowadays. There's no point getting another 690 goldeds into Herman Prime just to bench your Boudica to have a March that's maybe 15 to 20% better at the max. So Boudica with Zhuge still is going to be perfectly fine for the open field. Even Henry with Zhuge, if that's your only March, is going to be perfectly fine. You don't need to get Herman for that March. If you're running something like YSG and Zhuge, maybe you want to get Herman at that point and run Zhuge Herman. But even then, it could still be perfectly fine to run YSG Zhuge and ignore Herman as well. So if you got Boudica Zhuge or Henry Zhuge specifically, ignore Herman for now and just invest in the next commanders that come out that you find useful for your account, because those 2 pairings which I mentioned are going to be perfectly fine for now and possibly even the upcoming future. Whereas Herman Prime, yes, he is an improvement. He is just not fully needed if you have Boudica Zhuge or Henry Zhuge. Now, the final thing I'd like to discuss in today's video is fairly simple, and it is for Season 2 and Season 1 players who may be heading into Season 3 or Season of Conquest, which commander is a better investment? Is it Herman Prime or Boudica? Because often those accounts come from a clean slate. Maybe they don't even have a YSG and they're looking to make their first ever fresh Season of Conquest Archer March. And I think in that situation, the best investment is going to be Herman Prime because he's got more long-term potential. His poison effects will never ever lose meta value. I think that's almost impossible. He's always going to have his defense reduction. He's never going to lose that. He's also always going to have his AoE skill damage bonuses, and he's always going to be a good AoE commander. I think that's always going to stay the case. He's almost going to be like Zhuge and YSG, one of those commanders that won't lose value for a very long time, because his kit is so not reliant on one thing. The only thing he needs is an AoE commander to be paired with. So Herman probably won't lose value for the next 3 to 4, even 5 years, whereas Boudica is already almost, I think, possibly like a year old, almost going on to 2 years old in around 6 months, and also she is very reliant on that skill damage taken increase to be one of the most powerful commanders in the game, which obviously can be taken away at any moment by a new commander. So Boudica Prime is, yes, a very powerful commander, but Herman, I think, has more long-term potential, and as a first investment is going to be a better choice than Boudica Prime. Not to mention he synergizes crazily well with Zhuge, which obviously means Herman Prime with Zhuge is going to be the first March you ever get, and it's going to be the best Archer March in the game currently. So Herman Prime with Zhuge, definitely really solid choice as a first Archer March, and it's just going to be better than any other Boudica Prime pairing you could make when you first hit Season 3 or even Season of Conquest. So if you're brand new to Season of Conquest and Season 3, Herman is your best choice in every single situation, because you either have access to YSG or maybe Tamaris if you're insane, and also you get access to Zhuge. All 3 of those commanders best paired with Herman. He's pretty much the best first investment for Season 2 and Season 3, plus he's got more long-term potential. So he is just the best early game investment. So now that we've discussed pretty much everything about both commanders, when to invest in each one, and which one is a better investment in the early game, which one is just the better overall investment, which one takes the cake as the new best Archer primary commander, or I guess even sometimes secondary commander, and I think it goes to Herman Prime. Herman is just better than Boudica in most regards. There are some Marches where Boudica still excels, and she still is very powerful. Don't take that the wrong way. She's still going to be crazy good. I'm obviously still going to be running my Boudica, getting even more kills. I don't plan to stop. And she's going to hold value for the future. But I don't think she's the first investment nowadays. And she's only a first investment if you have some very niche commanders. So Herman holds more current value in the game. But Boudica with Zhuge especially is not a March you want to split up if you currently have it. So Herman is definitely a better choice to first invest in. But if you've already got Boudica Zhuge, don't bother investing in Herman, it's just not going to be worth it for you. So now that you've made it to the end of today's video, I'd like to ask you to do just one very small favor for me, and that is join the Archer Syndicate Discord server. It's one of the best places to get advice on anything in Rise of Kingdoms, even if it's not necessarily Archer Commander related, because I'm so sad that I sit here and I read skills on infantry commanders, and I sit here and I read skills on cav commanders. So if you need any advice with your account, if you're interested on personalized advice on if you should get Herman Prime or not, then you should just join the Discord server. It's super easy, I don't send out many notifications, and you'll only be notified when I send out a new video. So consider joining. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description, and trust me, you won't regret it. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.